There it was, an old letter, wedged behind a dusty box in the attic. I didn't mean to find it, but once I did, I couldn't just ignore it. The envelope was yellowed with age, addressed to Clara, my wife of 25 years. The postmark dated back to the early days of our marriage. Curiosity piqued, I took it downstairs. "Clara, look what I found," I said, holding out the letter. Her reaction was like a gut punch. The color drained from her face, and her hands trembled as she took it. But then, she shoved it back at me, unopened. "Just some old thing. Forget about it," she muttered, turning away. That night, I lay awake, the letter's presence like a weight on my chest. Something was off. Clara had always been an open book. Now, she was a locked diary, and I didn't have the key. I remembered the little changes in her over the years, so subtle I'd almost missed them. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore, the late nights at the office, the whispered phone calls. Days passed. The letter sat on my desk, unopened but screaming its silent questions. I wanted to respect Clara's privacy, but doubts gnawed at me. It felt like there was a stranger in our house, wearing my wife's face. I decided to confront her. "Clara, we need to talk about that letter. What's in it?" I asked one evening. She looked at me, eyes brimming with unshed tears. "It's nothing, just leave it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I couldn't, though. That letter was a splinter in my mind. So, I did what I never thought I'd do. I opened it. The words were like a punch to the gut. An old flame, talking about a love that never died, plans that never came to fruition. My hands shook as I read. When Clara came home that night, I was waiting, the letter on the table between us. "You owe me an explanation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She sighed, a sound of defeat, and sat down. "It was a long time ago. He was my first love. We planned a life together, but then I met you, and everything changed. I chose you. I've always chosen you," she said, her voice laced with pain and sincerity. I listened, my emotions a tornado inside me. Love, anger, betrayal, but above all, an overwhelming sadness. We talked for hours, unearthing the buried past, our voices sometimes raised, sometimes just whispers. In the end, we sat there, emotionally exhausted. "I'm sorry," she said, "I should have told you. Can you forgive me?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman I fell in love with. The years had changed us, but the core of what we had was still there. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm willing to try." The letter had opened old wounds, but it also opened a door to healing. We decided to start therapy, to rebuild what we had. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. The letter was a relic of the past, but our future was still unwritten. You know, they say hindsight is 20/20. Never really bought into that until recently. I was sitting on our worn-out couch, staring at a bank statement that shouldn't exist, when a memory hit me like a truck. A conversation with my old buddy, Mike, from years back. We were at our usual spot, a dingy bar downtown. He leaned over, beer in hand, and said something I laughed off at the time. "Watch out, man. I've heard things about Clara. Rumors, you know?" I shrugged it off, chalked it up to Mike's love for gossip. But now, I wasn't so sure. That memory was still fresh when I ran into Sarah, an old acquaintance from our early days. The kind of person you're glad to see but don't keep in touch with. We chatted about life, the weather, and then her tone changed. "I saw Clara the other day," she said, a bit too casually. She seemed different, preoccupied with something, or someone, maybe. She gave me a knowing look, one I couldn't quite decipher, and then she was gone. I couldn't shake the feeling. Was I just being paranoid? The doubts were eating me up. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I dug into Clara's things. Not my proudest moment, but I had to know. And there it was, hidden in a file cabinet under a pile of old receipts. A bank statement for an account I didn't know existed. Clara's name was on it, and the numbers? They didn't make sense. Large withdrawals, thousands of dollars, gone. Where to? Why? I sat there, bank statement in hand, feeling like I was in one of those cheap detective novels Clara loves to read. Only this was real, too real. I had to confront her. "Clara, what's this?" I asked, holding up the statement. Her face, usually an open book, closed up like a steel trap. "It's nothing. Just forget about it," she said, but her voice trembled. "Nothing? Clara, this is a lot of money. Where's it going?" I pushed, but she wouldn't budge. It's my money, my business, she snapped, a hint of desperation in her eyes. That night, we barely spoke. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Was Mike right all those years ago? Was Sarah hinting at something more? What was Clara hiding? The next morning, she was gone early, a note on the kitchen table saying she'd be back late. I felt alone, more than I ever had. It was like living with a stranger. The doubts were choking me. I had to do something, anything. So I called Mike. Remember what you told me about Clara? What did you mean? There was a pause. I thought you knew, man. I didn't want to stir things up. But there were rumors, whispers about her and some guy. I didn't believe it at first, but then I saw them together, laughing, a bit too close. I thought you should know. The pieces were falling into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. Infidelity? A secret life? The money? I needed answers, but I didn't know where to start. All I knew was that the Clara I thought I knew was becoming more of a mystery every day. And I had to find out who she really was, for better or worse. You'd think after 25 years, I'd know everything about Clara. Turns out, I was wrong. Dead wrong. It started with a phone call, one of those moments that seem insignificant until they're not. I was passing by the kitchen when I heard her. Yes, I'll be there. No, he doesn't know. It's better this way. Her voice, hushed and urgent, sent a chill down my spine. I confronted her about it at dinner. Who were you talking to? I asked, trying to sound casual. Clara looked up, a flicker of something, maybe fear, in her eyes. Just a friend, planning a little trip. A trip? This was news to me. The next day, she announced she was leaving for a few days. Just need some time to clear my head, she said. But the way she avoided my gaze told me it was more than that. Something was up, something big, and I wasn't part of it. I would have let it go, maybe, if it weren't for Uncle Joe. He's Clara's uncle, a man more acquainted with a bottle than reality. But that night at the family gathering, he was more lucid than I'd seen him in years. He cornered me in the kitchen, a glass of whiskey in his hand. You should know, son, he slurred, his breath a pungent wave of alcohol. That girl of yours, she's been keeping secrets. Big ones. His words, though muddled, hit me hard. Family secrets? About Clara? I pressed him for more, but he just shook his head, a sad, knowing smile on his lips. Not my place to say, but watch your back. Then he wandered off, lost in his own world. I lay awake that night, my mind racing. The phone call, the sudden trip, Uncle Joe's cryptic warning. What was Clara hiding? Was it another man? An old flame maybe? Or something else, something darker? I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. Our home, once a place of comfort, now felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest touch. The next morning, I found a note from Clara on the fridge. Gone for a few days. Don't worry. But worry was all I could do. I had to find out what was going on, to uncover the truth hiding in the shadows of our life. I started where anyone would. I checked her computer, her phone records, anything that might give me a clue. But Clara was careful, too careful. There were no traces, no leads to follow. So I waited, feeling like a detective in a bad noir film, jumping at every phone call, every knock at the door. But Clara was a ghost, her presence in our home reduced to pictures on the wall and the faint scent of her perfume. Then, 4 days later, she came back, as if nothing had happened. Missed me? She asked, a smile on her face. But her eyes, they didn't have the same warmth as before. Something had changed, and I was determined to find out what. The truth was out there, somewhere, and I was going to uncover it, no matter what it took. Life has a funny way of tossing you curveballs when you least expect them. I learned that the hard way, rummaging through a box of old stuff in our attic. Among the dusty memories and forgotten knick-knacks, I found it, a photograph that shouldn't have existed. Clara, young and carefree, her arms wrapped around a man I didn't recognize. They looked close, too close for comfort. The kind of intimacy that speaks of shared secrets and whispered promises. I turned the photo over, looking for a date or a name, anything to explain it away. Nothing. Just Clara's bright smile, frozen in time, with this mystery man. It gnawed at me, this piece of her past I knew nothing about. I might have let it go if it weren't for Tom, an old friend from back in the day. We were grabbing a beer, the usual catch-up, when he dropped the bomb. You remember that time at Jenny's party, years ago? Clara was there with some guy, all over each other. Thought you knew, man. Tom's words hit me like a sledgehammer. I tried to laugh it off, but the laughter died in my throat. The image of that photo, now burned into my mind, wouldn't let me. I had to know more. So, I started asking around, casually, trying not to seem desperate. But the answers I got were just more questions. Nobody knew anything, or at least, they weren't telling. Then, as if fate was playing a cruel joke, I ran into him. The man from the photo. I recognized him immediately, even after all these years. Clara's first love, Jack. We bumped into each other at the grocery store, of all places. He looked at me, a flash of recognition, then something else, pity, maybe? "Hey, you're Clara's husband, right?" he said, his voice casual, too casual. "How's she doing?" We talked, awkward small talk, but his eyes gave him away. He knew something about Clara. I could feel it, but he was a closed book, polite to a fault. "She's fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Just fine. Life's been throwing me curveballs lately, but nothing prepared me for that Thursday afternoon." A package arrived, no return address, just Clara's name written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. She opened it to reveal a necklace, the kind that screams money and secrets. Her eyes widened, a mix of shock and something I couldn't quite place. "Who's it from?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She shrugged, tucking the necklace back into its velvet box. "I don't know, must be some mistake." I wanted to believe her, but doubt's a persistent bugger. It nagged at me, especially after what happened next. A few days later, I was working in the garage when I heard her on the phone through the open window. She was talking to someone, her voice hushed and urgent. "Yes, I received it. No, he doesn't know anything. Please, we can't keep doing this." My heart sank. Was she having an affair? That night, I confronted her. Who was on the phone? And the necklace, Clara, where did it come from? The argument that followed was a hurricane, blowing the roof off the life we'd built. She yelled, I yelled, and then, through tears, she broke down. It was a mistake, she sobbed. Early in our marriage, I was unfaithful. It was just once, but I've been paying for it ever since. The words hit me like a freight train. My Clara, the woman I'd shared my life with, had been someone else's. The pain was physical, a punch to the gut. Why now? Why bring this up after all these years? I demanded. That trip I took, she confessed, it wasn't for me. It was him, the other man. He's been blackmailing me, threatening to tell you everything. The necklace was a reminder of his control. I felt numb, the world around me a blur. My marriage, my life, it was all built on a lie. I wanted to scream, to rage, but all I could muster was a hollow laugh. Blackmail? Jesus, Clara. Why didn't you come to me? She wiped her tears, a broken look in her eyes. I was scared. Scared of losing you, of destroying what we have. I thought I could handle it, make it go away. We sat in silence, the air thick with words unsaid. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman I loved, flawed and frightened. I was angry, yeah, but beneath it all was a love that had weathered 25 years of life's storms. I made a decision right then and there. We'll deal with this guy, together, I said. But Clara, no more secrets. We face this head on, as a team. She nodded, relief and love washing over her face. Thank you, she whispered. The days that followed were a whirlwind. We got the police involved, dealt with the blackmailer. It wasn't easy, but we did it together. And in facing that darkness, we found a new strength in each other. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Trust, once broken, isn't easily mended. But we were trying, taking it one day at a time. The necklace, that symbol of past mistakes, went back to its sender, a final goodbye to a chapter we were closing. We had a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. We'd been through hell, but we'd come out the other side, a little battered, a little bruised, but together. And in the end, that's what mattered. Hey everyone, quick shout out to all of you watching. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that like button, it really helps us out. And hey, why not subscribe too? That way, you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. It's just a click away, and it means a lot to us. Thanks for the support, and now, let's get back to the fun. You think you know someone, right? Then one day, boom, you realize you've been sharing your bed with a stranger. That's how I felt the day I stumbled upon Clara's second phone. Hidden in the back of her wardrobe, under a pile of winter clothes we hadn't touched in years. I didn't want to, but I looked through it. Texts, emails, pictures, a whole other life right there in my hands. My wife, the woman I'd loved for a quarter of a century, living a lie. When she got back from her trip, she was different. Eyes red, shoulders slumped. Guilt was written all over her face. I didn't say a word about the phone, just watched her, waiting for her to come clean. But she didn't, so I confronted her. "Clara, we need to talk." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one we'd shared breakfasts and dreams. I threw the phone down between us. "What's this?" She paled, looking from the phone to me. "John, Her voice cracked, and she looked away. "I can explain." "Explain? Clara, there's a whole other life here. How long has this been going on?" The story came out in pieces, each one like a shard of glass to the heart. A long-term affair, started soon after we got married. It lasted years, but she ended it. Or so she said. The second phone was just to stay in contact, just in case, she whispered. "Just in case of what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I was angry, sure, but more than that, I was heartbroken. The woman I thought I knew, the life I thought we had, it was all a lie. She cried, a lot. Said she was sorry, that she never meant to hurt me. But the damage was done. "Why, Clara, why not just leave?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I was scared. Scared of losing you, losing our life. I thought I could keep it separate. I was wrong." We sat there for what felt like hours, the air heavy with the weight of her betrayal. I wanted to hate her, to scream in rage. But looking at her, so broken and lost, I just felt empty. "I don't know if I can get past this, Clara," I said finally. The words hurt to say, but they were the truth. "I understand," she replied, her voice so low I could barely hear it. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, if you'll let me." I didn't have an answer for her. Not then. How do you forgive a betrayal that big? How do you rebuild a life on broken trust? That night, I slept in the guest room, my mind racing. The woman I loved, the life we built, it all felt like a sham. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing, it wouldn't be the same. Not after this. You know, they say that in marriage, you've got to weather a few storms together. But what if the storm is your marriage? That's where I found myself, standing in our living room, looking at Clara, the woman I'd shared my life with. I could still see the girl I'd fallen in love with, but now, she was like a book with pages torn out. I took a deep breath. "Clara, I can't do this anymore. Not like this. It's either full transparency, no more secrets, or I'm done." My voice was steady, but inside, I was a mess. This was the woman I'd planned to grow old with. Clara's face crumpled, and she reached for my hands. "John, please. I'll do anything. I've made mistakes, but I can't lose you. You're my everything." Her words, her plea, it hit me hard. But the hurt, the betrayal, it was like a wall between us. Could we really tear it down? Could I? I needed space, time to think. So, I called my best friend, Mike. We'd known each other since high school, been through thick and thin. If anyone could give me some perspective, it was him. We met at our old haunt, a quiet bar downtown. Over a couple of beers, I poured it all out, the secrets, the lies, the ultimatum. Mike listened, quiet and thoughtful. "Man, that's rough," he said finally. "But here's the thing. People screw up, big time. Doesn't mean they don't deserve a second chance. You gotta ask yourself, can you forgive her? And can you live without her?" His words hit me. Could I? Did I still love her enough to try? I went home that night with a head full of thoughts. Clara was there, sitting at the kitchen table, looking like she'd been crying. We talked, really talked, for the first time in what felt like forever. "I'll be transparent," she said, her voice trembling. "Passwords, phone records, whatever you need. And I'll go to therapy, we can go together. I need you to give me a chance to make this right." I looked at her, really looked. And I saw it, the remorse, the love. It was like seeing the sun after a long storm. Maybe, just maybe, we could get through this. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We try, together. But Clara, no more secrets. This is it." She nodded, relief and determination in her eyes. "No more secrets, I promise." It wasn't going to be easy. Trust, once broken, isn't easily fixed. But as I sat there with her, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. We started therapy the next week. It was hard, digging into the mess we'd made. But we did it together, and slowly, things started to change. We laughed more, talked more. I won't say it was like before, because it wasn't. It was different, but maybe, just maybe, it could be better. So, that's where we are, Clara and me. At a crossroads, trying to find our way back to each other. It's not a fairy tale ending, but it's real. And sometimes, real is enough. I left the store with a cart full of groceries and a head full of doubts. The pieces were there, but they didn't fit together. The photo, Tom's story, Jack's knowing looks. That night, I confronted Clara. Showed her the photo, asked her point blank about Jack, about the party. She looked at the photo, her face a mask of surprise, then something else, regret? Jack was a long time ago, before us, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It was nothing, a fling. I never thought it